Before this episode, here's a message about some online groups that we're running under the name Odd One In.
We currently have an autistic counsellors group happening. If you are interested in a future version of that group, please do keep in touch with us.
The next group that we're starting is happening in mid-February, launching on Thursday, February the 19th. It will run fortnightly for 6 sessions between 7 and 9 p.m. UK time. And it's for autistic people in mixed neurotype relationships. For more details on that and everything else, Autistic License, go to autisticlicense.com and sign up for our newsletter. And for the groups, go to autisticlicense.com/groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the Autistic License podcast. I'm Siana, and I'm in Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland.
And I'm Leo in Suffolk, England.
We invite you to listen in on our conversations as we experiment with unmasking in an autistic space. We talk about what it means to discover we're autistic as adults, especially with established careers as therapists. We want people to know that autistic therapists exist and to broaden the conversation about neurodiversity. You're so welcome to join us, whoever you are and wherever in the world you are. We hope you'll find something of interest and connection here. We were going to see Wicked, the second one.
And how was it?
It was good. Yeah, it was good. Although, I mean, a bit concerned about Ariana Grande and this excessive dieting thing that's going on. Uh-huh. She looked bad, like her, all the bones were showing, all around her neck and her top.
I'm not up to date with all of this particular narrative. Is this opinion?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think.
Your opinion.
Well, I think it's probably being talked about in pop culture, so Lana knows about it. I think the people are saying that they can notice this. It is really noticeable, but yeah, I think it's a problem. I think most people would look and see it as a problem.
Well, I don't know why I'm uncomfortable about that, but there's something that I want made explicit, and I can't put my finger on it. That your concern, and maybe the concern of others, is not for her personally, because she's a grown-up who can make decisions, but the influence that's going to have on your daughter, for example.
I am concerned about her personally, because I am concerned that she is not well and she is involved in an industry that will keep exploiting her until she dies.
I see that, but then for us to be talking about it, there's presumably wider implications, which is her as a public figure to whom impressionable humans may...
yeah, of course.
May imitate.
Of course, that is a concern when celebrities do these kind of things. It always has been. But yeah, I mean, I am concerned about her as a person. I obviously do not work with Ariana Grande or know Ariana Grande, but, maybe it's an autistic thing. She's a human being.
No, I understand. And I'm actually more curious about my own reaction to talking about it or not talking about it than I am as to why you are. And part of it, I suppose, is there are plenty of... Okay, I'm beginning to see the differences as I lay it out, but I'll carry on laying it out. There are plenty of people in the public eye, entertainers, etc., of all genders, who are very overweight. And we don't talk about them in the same way necessarily, or we do, and it's very derogatory. And I suppose I'm noticing a difference there. The difference, though, another difference, though, which I'm identifying, is that is not necessarily... how do I know? I assume it's not necessarily encouraged by any particular industry, other than some very specific ones, whereas what you're talking about is kind of fame and success is conditional on conforming to body shapes and weights, etc. So I can see why that's potentially more of a public concern. But I'm just thinking about people's reaction to being told they're unhealthy because of their weight, because I've been on the other end of that. There you go. And is it okay? I think now I'm getting to why I felt some discomfort at saying this person I don't know is unhealthily underweight. And that's an opinion, but it could come across as a judgment that may or may not be welcome. You know, it's very complicated what I'm trying to tease apart here. But all I initially knew was, is it okay to talk about somebody I don't know in those what felt like judgmental terms? And I suppose what I'm doing there is projecting out how I may well have felt for being extremely overweight for some years, and people around me making judgments about right and wrong that were intertwined, maybe inextricably, from issues of health and well-being, because there are so many personal judgments about the sort of person that I was being seen as an overweight person.
Yes.
I.e., willpower, lazy, all of those things.
Yeah.
So to hear then somebody else being, in my experience in that moment, judged for their weight and their body shape, even though I absolutely agree with everything you said about the imperative and the pressures and the wider implications for people who do imitate public figures. But I just see this division, and it was making me uncomfortable.
I get it. And as time was going on, I was trying to understand why you were being the way that you were being. I could see that it would obviously prod that. And I think that also comes back to being an autistic person. I would have probably had no problem with saying to your face about my concerns about your well-being because of your weight. There's a lot of doubt in my mind, and there's absolutely an autistic element for me in this, is I'm trying to work out what's fair. And is that the right, and my favourite trick of how is that the other way around? Whether through being overweight and underweight, or to be gender binary about it, a man and a woman. There are so many differences. It just made me prickle, and it did make me prickle because it was personal to me. It's just that specific, and us talking about it has sent me into a bit of a tiz about what's fair and just, and the different ways we judge different ends of spectrums. But do we just be quiet about it then? If I cared about you, right, 10 years ago, if I cared about you and was concerned about you still being on the planet in 10 years' time, I don't know how I could have not said something, considering that you had breathing difficulties, you were hospitalised several times a year,
yes.
You were injecting with insulin because of diabetes. It was getting worse and worse. I'm not saying I would have blamed you for doing that. You did not do that to yourself. So there would not be any judgment, but there would be, this is a human being. And unless something changes, he might not be around.
Yes.
And so I am concerned. And I know I don't know Ariana Grande, but being an autistic person, I can still actually feel that for another human being in the world, even if they're not my friend.
I don't think there's any disagreement between us about the dangers, the facts, the risks, the level of agency that any one person has or hasn't got. I don't think we're disagreeing about that. I think this is a very important conversation, though, because we've come up against something here that's simply uncovering a lot of layers, potential in society in general, potential judgment and or discrimination and or rights of self-determination. There's a lot going on, and the bits, I think, because I'm uncovering this as I speak, that are or were making me uncomfortable were about the equality of differences. in this case, around health, well-being and weight and body shape and gender as well. And I just immediately noticed, and something brought me up short. I'm still not entirely sure what it was, but it was just this question of, is this fair? How would it be the other way around? Etc., etc. There's genuinely nothing about right and wrong here in terms of you and I, right? But I think if I hadn't have said anything, I would have been left with this discomfort and not really understood it. And I think as we speak, I am understanding it more. I do see it's relevant to our podcast because it's definitely to do with being an autistic person, and it's definitely to do with a relationship with public life, which we are on a much, much, much smaller scale. But there it is. We are talking to people we don't know. And so all of these things are kind of jostling for position, trying in my mind, as with so many things all the time, to find an equal place, to find a level playing field. And it felt disrupted for me. And so I, brought up a question, and then that's now expanding into, as I say, a question of right and wrong and fairness.
Oftentimes it might be talked about, as you said to me, are you concerned about the influence and on young people and stuff? That, I think, would be a common argument. And I think the autistic dimension is, no, it's just a human being who looks unwell, the same as someone who suddenly began to, I don't know, think of an example. Something that you might notice. And
something visible about
them that was a change that indicated something around their body. I don't know. I've got no words for it because it all sounds not what I'm trying to say. But I wouldn't shy away from saying to somebody, oh, you're limping, or I don't know, or there's a rash all over your face, or like that's the autistic dimension. I'm going to point out what other people might be too polite to mention. Now, in this case, as I said, there's obviously forums and social media that are talking about this, and I haven't seen any of those. I've only heard it from Lana. But I'm not going to not mention, out of politeness, something that I see that could indicate that harm is coming to that person and they might need intervention.
Understood.
But for you, that is exactly what I would have done 10 years ago. Okay.
So now I'm more comfortable with what we're talking about, and I'm more comfortable with how we're talking about it for whatever reasons. I'm not quite sure what. So I'm constantly doing what I think we all do, is what if, to try to make sense of something rather than to try to be right or be competitive in some way. And so a question that's just come into my mind is, you're talking about her because you know who she is, because she's very, very famous. You're talking about me because you know me personally. Would you or somebody, would this be acceptable to approach a very, to your eyes, noticeably unhealthily underweight person in public who you don't know and say, excuse me, you don't know me, but I'm very concerned about your body shape and your weight, and I think you should do something about it because I'm very concerned for you. Now, there's a massive autistic stereotype, isn't it? Where we're very rude because we say something we see and it's nobody else would have said it because that would be totally socially unacceptable. But I doubt actually that many of us would really do that. And so that again brings up that equality thing for me.
Okay, so when I was 16, one of my first kind of socialising opportunities was to go to a Christian event at night in Belfast, near the city centre. And for one of the first times, I saw someone who was probably unhoused, and they were crying at a bus stop. And I, being autistic, was very moved by this and I engaged with this person in a fully sensitive human kind of a way. And I went into the event and I located a woman that I knew who happened to be the mother of one of my friends. I was in floods of tears. I said, there is a woman outside, and gave the story. She needs help. And this person tried to tell me that it was not my responsibility, that this person was probably a drinker, you know, all of those things that adults say. And it was probably dismissed as that innocent 16-year-old. She's so sweet, you know, bleeding heart, you know, thinks she can help everybody. In some ways, I'm still that 16-year-old. So, yes, I've become calloused by the world. I do not stop and talk to every unhoused, vulnerable person on the street, you know, rightly or wrongly. I don't do that any longer. Do I still feel those things if I let myself? Yes.
Yes.
You know, do I still find being out in the world overwhelming a lot, because I really take in the people around me and I'm really, really, really moved by who they are and what I see on their face? Yes. You know, did I very recently not tell you about how I took Phoebe, one of my cats, to the vet and had a 2-minute interaction with a vet who I had not seen for years and do not know personally, go home and hold his expression in my heart for the next week until such times as it became revealed to me on social media that he had gone through a terrible situation. I'm not going to go into details, but it is out there on the public media. That's how I am with people. Now, yes, even as a 50-year-old woman, had I have had more than 2 minutes with that man and he was handing my cat back as he went on to deal with the next person, if I had had more than 2 minutes, would I have said, "Are you okay?" Probably, you know. So is that appropriate? Is that not appropriate? It's fucking autistic. And it's the same kind of thing that, like, yes, I probably would ask a stranger. If I looked that stranger in their eyes and I was concerned about their well-being, I would say.
Okay. And we've probably then got sets of rules, internal, individualistic ones, probably, about when we would and wouldn't intervene. And that, I imagine, does, well, it certainly does for me, evolve over time.
Yes.
So that, and this, you know, we are spreading this, I can see this conversation spreading out very widely now, because this is, you know, I've managed to, I suppose, disentangle so much of this that was mine, because people who I didn't know did say things to me about my weight. And they were extremely unwelcome, and they were very, very hurtful, and they did nothing to help me. If anything, they probably delayed me doing something about it, because I got very autistically adamant internally about my own sense of agency and choice. So there's whether it's helpful or not as well, which is yet another stream which we have to navigate and guess at as well, ultimately.
And
because
you know,
we can't
he might have told me to fuck off, and you know, everybody who I happen to see and perceive something with, I'm autistic because I'm what might be called an empath, whatever.
Yes, yeah, same here.
You know, it might not be welcome, and maybe I don't say it, but there's a part of me that would say it, and a part of me that might not regret saying it, because I'm also the person who will ask people if they're suicidal who need to be asked if they're suicidal in a therapy room, and will say the thing that no one in their family will say because it needs to be said. And
you are in a very specific role and environment in those moments, where it's definitely
also say it.
Oh, I know.
If I needed to someone else who revealed something to me when they were changing my tire. You know, that's the autistic thing.
And it's the autistic thing, and actually it is the therapist thing, because not only are we driven by a sense of what is right and wrong and what is helpful and what is fair and just, but we also have, not to sound too self-aggrandizing, but we have a better than average understanding of psychology and emotion and people's emotional lives and what people can experience subconsciously as well as consciously. And these all play into these decisions and rules that we have. And I suppose what we're now broadly talking about is interventions in the broadest sense. When is it that we do intervene? And to me, what's interesting about that right now is how that evolves as we grow and become more experienced. So the whistleblowing thing is an ultimate decision that a lot of people will make that we have talked about before, which really exemplifies this in that one does find that every time there's a news story about a whistleblower in commerce or government or the military or whatever, they are almost always autistic, because there is that thing about having less choice about whether we intervene. Not whether it's right or wrong. I think most people can see the rights and wrongs, but less choice about whether we intervene. And the thing that's just come to me is, I don't know how old I would have been, mid-90s, so I was probably in my late 20s, and I was walking back very late at night in London from a friend's house, and I walked past a pub that was approaching closing time, and there was outside the pub, on the kind of front path that led up to the pub door, was a couple, a man and a woman, and the man was very aggressively shouting at the woman and shoving her. And I noticed that although the pub was crowded, nobody was paying any attention, and it looked dangerous to me. That was my instinct, that the things might get actually physical and harmfully physical. And so what I did was, there was a side door to the pub as well as the front door, and I walked around to the side to walk through the pub as if I was then coming out of the pub rather than just approach from the street. And I just stood between the man and the woman facing the woman, and I said, "Are you all right?" And he became extremely obviously abusive, because he was very angry at me and, none of your business and get out of the way and do you want some and all of that kind of thing. And I just, somehow, I don't know how, I stayed very calm and said, "Well, I'll leave when she tells me she's okay. Are you okay?" And she did say, "This is fine. This, I'm all right. This isn't," I can't remember what her words were, but "this is not dangerous." In other words, this is kind of par for the course. We're having a row. So I did back away, but I hung about for a while, and then it did simmer down. And, I don't know any of the context of any of that, of course. But the point was, I am not of great stature or strength. And I certainly wasn't when I was in my mid-20s. And this is actually before I was overweight, just to circle that one off. But certainly, no experience whatsoever of physical confrontation, no confidence at all that I would not get beaten to a bloody pulp if I pushed somebody too far. And so I clearly took this huge risk as far as I was concerned. But actually, I genuinely wasn't thinking about that at the time. And that was stupid, actually. If I look back on that now as a 59-year-old, the action and the risk were not in balance at all. And actually what I could have done was got the people in the pub to call the police, for example, and hung around and, there were plenty of people as well. It was a pub full of people at chucking out time. It was a really dumb, if I look back on it and I'm honest with myself, a dumb thing to do. And the risk-benefit thing just doesn't work out. That was because I'm autistic. I had no choice, really. I didn't fight over the choice of it. I didn't think, "Oh, what shall I do?" I just waded in. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing for anybody. So that is how being autistic in this context really does make a difference to our, is it urge the right word? To intervene in situations where almost everybody would not. That's not a right and wrong judgment. It's a level of, what's the word? It's not like urge, but it is a drive, I suppose, that isn't a choice. or as very little choice.
Yeah,
it's a compulsion. No, you're in the literal sense of the word.
Yeah,
and I think we do that a lot. And I don't know that it's always helpful just because it's morally or ethically right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So there's that thread as well when we're thinking about intervening and feeling that we have no choice, or it not being a consideration.
Yeah.
And it's not fair when it causes us a great deal more aggravation, trouble, distress than it would for somebody else as well, which it often does.
Mm-hmm.
I think I should let you speak for a bit.
No, I think it is that kind of, it's just being autistic in the world and managing yourself while being autistic. And because of the urgency or the level of empathy or the level of understanding that I experience when around other people, obviously as a 16-year-old, it felt like a no-brainer. I need to reach out. This person's not okay. I need to get emergency help. And social skills wise, did not know that nothing was going to happen, because that's just par for the course on a Saturday night. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. I guess that the level of empathy, the level of overwhelm that I get from being out in the world, for me, is not always so much the sensory stimulation. It's the emotional, psychological stimulation of every time I go out, I will be affected by people around me who reveal so much more than they know that they're revealing just by their way of being. And, I probably over the years have become more socially skilled, adept at not speaking that kind of thing out. I still probably do more than most people. And some people take that opportunity, some people don't, or some people will start to test the waters and I'll choose. And I guess that was also what you were implying, or you were saying about, we give off a vibe that we're a good person to talk to and we can facilitate that or not. And I don't think that that's wrong. I think that if I looked back on my life, or if other people remember me as someone who listened to them for 20 minutes, if I can do that, I can do that. I'm not looking for them to book a session or thinking that whatever. Like, I had a locksmith relatively recently who confided some stuff and I had time to listen to him and I did so. There's a complex interplay there. And I guess that using the opportunity to say to you my concerns when I reflect on what I can see and what I hear about Ariana Grande are sort of a example of that. I'm not going to find her publicist and reach out and invite her to therapy. And I'm not going to do any activism on it. So I'm not trying to raise awareness. I'm not trying to slag off. I'm not going to say, isn't it so awful that industry's like that? That's none of my intention. I think it's probably my main intention is to say to you that I was moved. So you asked me how the movie was. Probably the main thing about that movie is that I was moved by how much of her body, many of her bones are showing. And, so on its very purest level, that's what I've taken from that. That's what I've noticed. And I probably hadn't said that so starkly or realised that. That's how I experience a movie. Not the story, not the effects, not the lighting, not the acting. It's that, oh my goodness, she looks... Yeah, I'm not going to go into it.
Yes. No,
that's what I'll take out of it.
And that's what we can do, is talk about how we react and respond.
Yes.
And that's what we have done. And I think that is a really useful for me personally, but I think publicly too, very, very useful conversation between two autistic people, especially two autistic psychotherapists as well, where it's what we experience and notice, and then the autistic part of it is our compulsion to speak about it, or in particular cases to actually intervene and try to change something that we see as wrong or unhelpful or unfair. You know, that is how we support our core values in that regard. But there's also the other parts of us which have those very strong emotional reactions that aren't actually necessarily to do with anybody else or have an effect on anybody else. But to recognise that all of those threads are intertwined, and some of them contradict even, like as we get older, the level of risk that we see and the differences that might make to the actions that we do or don't do.
Yes, it feels very like it would feel very misunderstood to see me as someone who was just going to rant about the dangers of this for young people, or in people who'd be influenced, or to see this as like getting at her for being so whatever.
I think in my summary, that's what I was trying to bring us round to as well, that actually the predominant root of this conversation was the personal reaction part of that. And everything else then flowed out, I think, really, really usefully, because personally I was able to take out a lot of my own experience around body shape and weight, around being autistic and having particularly strong compulsions to intervene in particular situations to uphold my values, what difference it's made that I'm a therapist on top of that, and that actually, yes, it was our own personal experiences of situations and our emotional reactions to them that are triggered and that are that do then drive whatever it is we do or don't do in response. I just think that's really, really useful. And when we talk in our intro about letting people know that autistic therapists exist and what it's like and what difference that makes to somebody, I think all of the threads that we're speaking about are really, really important and complex illustrations of what some of those experiences of being us are like.
Yeah, well, I think that shining light as well on how overwhelming the world is not
very good.
Always the stereotype of I can't handle the lights in the supermarket.
Yes.
I can't handle the supermarket because I will take in people in the supermarket and I will hold them in mind and be affected by their energy. Yes, I don't like the lights, but it's not just that.
That's right. That's right.
So I think that that's important to show as well. And the empathy was there whether or not I was trained as a psychotherapist. And the empathy was there when I was a child. And, when I could perceive how my teachers were feeling and, things like that. And also the empathy is totally there whether I've got a relationship with people or not.
Yes.
It's just there.
Yes.
And it's there on TV and it's there, I just can do it, can feel it. And I think that that's really important to understand as well, but also how then we get it wrong in social life, that our heart really can be in it and it can be really, really, really pure. And yet that can be downright irritating, annoying, unwanted. So, as you say, and maybe the people that were commenting to you, some of their motivation was questionable, but even if it had have been somebody who really cared and just, was even allowing themselves to go to extremes, like what I said of, I want Leo to be here in 10 years and therefore I'm going to say this, that still might have not been appropriate and not been welcome. And yet, would I still have done it? What changes whether I do the thing or I don't do the thing? But it could be downright irritating. And I have to live in this world and temper being annoying with sometimes either not thinking it through properly or deciding that it's worth the risk of being annoying.
Exactly right. So much came up for me just then. Okay. So one, I was just thinking, and then had another thought. Anyway, God. I was thinking about the empathy part. Okay, the empathy part. That's really highlighted, I think, for me, you, and neurokin maybe, more generally, in relationships with nature, with animals, because that's a very pure expression where you don't have to think about the subconscious or the underlying messages that might be received when we do whatever it is we might do to interact with animals or to care for them or to be empathic. What suddenly occurred to me at that moment when I was thinking that at 1:30 on the December the 15th was that it's exactly a year since Woody died. And I just remembered that he came to me in a dream last night, and I wasn't thinking about the anniversary. But the empathy that we shared is so pure, and we don't have to worry about all of that other social stuff about whether things are offensive or not. We can be purely reactive and instinctive and empathic in our relationship with animals. So that was one thread. And then, you see, I knew this had happened, that I'd forget the other one. Just give me a minute. Okay. And the other thing was, yes, we have to leave pretty much to chance what our interventions are going to do. The decision on whether to make interventions of whatever kind that we've been talking about or others is based on supporting our values and our instincts and our empathy, whether it does good or not in a practical sense, or whether it makes things worse, is a risk that we take. And that's one of the differences too, where we have less choice about intervening, is that we are less probably cautious or the potential good that is done generally outweighs the potential for being annoying or disliked. And my own, again, I only have my own experiences to measure these against. But my experience, which I don't talk about the detail here, obviously, but of whistleblowing, which cost me hugely and did no good whatsoever, as far as I know. It didn't resolve the wrong that had been done.
Yeah.
And it cost me enormously and a lot of emotionally and socially. I have been asked, would you do it again? And it's not a choice. You see, that's the thing. I think people think I would consider all of that and then think, no, actually, because it's not worth it. And that, I think, actually, looking back, is the right decision there. That would be the right decision with hindsight, with knowing what the outcomes were. But actually, the truthful answer is, yes, I would do it again, because it wouldn't have occurred to me not to. That's the point. It's not really a choice. It's, do I leave this wrong unchallenged or not? And that, I don't think, would be possible unless it was a time machine thing with some insight and hindsight that I could magically have, which we don't. So if the theme here is, interventions driven by our autistic nature and then supported by our psychological experience, that it's instinct, empathy, and some knowledge, I think it's really valuable to try to explain how complex this is and that it is a real difference.
Yes, I've got an example that I can tell you the details of, but I can't put the full information out. But recently I've had a bereavement, and I actually chose to intervene at a certain point with with someone, and it turned out to be a matter of timing. The timing was right, and would have been too late if I hadn't have done it. And I think it's in situations, it's almost like I might get it wrong 20 times and it might be unwelcome, but I might actually get it right sometimes when it really matters, and that might be worth it to have an autistic person around you even if they are a social klutz.
So, and something else that comes up with that about when and how we intervene, which is another episode, I think, is death. That holds most people back from saying or doing things. It is pretty much the last social taboo in terms of interventions and conversations, and that you and I talk about it in quite what would seem to be flippant, offhand terms, even in terms of each other. People will remember from a couple of years ago on the podcast where we talked about the cancer scare that I had that summer, and that, that we got immediately onto you saying to me, well, you might die. And it's such an illustration of autistic directness that because it was between us as autistic people, it was welcome. But that the vast majority of people can't handle that or can't do it. And that would have stopped, I'm assuming again, the majority of people from the intervention that you made that was so hugely valuable, practically and emotionally, and for you personally. Mm-hmm. That's something I guess that neither of us would change.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously that came out at that time, but it does kind of still feed into it's still the same kind of principle as what I said like 10 years ago. Mm. I would have said something.
Yes.
Because I would have known that the next asthma attack could take you out, or it wouldn't be urgent that I would be nagging you every time I saw you. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't not have named it, even though it might have seemed to people less of a big deal that someone is quote unquote overweight. It wouldn't be just the overweight. It would be that is potentially you're going to die. Yes. But that also sounds like I think that I can prevent that in some way. But it's not that. It's that, is there more that you could do? Which of course you could, because you could have the surgery. Mm-hmm. So if that option's not being explored, then why not?
I think actually there is a difference with you, and I know we speculate a lot about what if we'd known each other sooner and how the different impacts that would have had. But if I had known you 10 years ago, and also known, which I didn't then for sure, that I was autistic and that we were having a neurokin relationship and conversation about that, I would know with no doubt whatsoever have received that very differently to the way that I would have and did receive that from other people. I actually think it probably would have brought things forward because of that, the freedom, the liberation of being able to name everything without an edge, without a competitive edge or a critical edge or a judgmental edge, that we know we can do that.
Yeah, and I think as well what I'm also now becoming aware of is the fact that people don't intervene with me when they need to intervene with me. When I was suicidal and disclosed at 19, 20, I needed intervention. When Lana was born, and how much I struggled to look after her and look after myself, I needed intervention. When I was really being severely exploited in a workplace and people knew and did nothing, I needed intervention. So there are times, and I guess maybe in some ways we are, if lots of us as therapists are honest, we partially at least, and maybe much more than we dare to admit or even know, do this to try and rectify what we haven't had.
Yes.
So in some ways in my career or in my life, I compensate and do for other people maybe what I wish would be done for myself. So I work with other people's loved ones in the therapy room, and their loved ones may not be saying the things that I dare to say to them. that's probably the wrong way to say it, but I'm going to do the thing anyway. You know, that's part of my responsibility as a therapist. And I think it's also my part of my it's what I take on in the world. And I think that there has not been enough intervention for me. And there's not enough intervention for a lot of people. And so probably I am partially driven by wanting to intervene if I possibly can with people.
Yes, that brings up the argument of whether true altruism exists or whether we are just obviously driven by trying to heal ourselves or, you know, doing unto others. You know, that's definitely my core value, is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Used to carry Martin Niemöller's quote, you know, first they came for the socialists in my wallet for years, because I am doing that for other people in the hope that that gets paid forward and that I'll be looked after in some altruistic seeming way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. If it's altruistic. If I look after you, is that altruistic? Is that from my end?
Yeah. Yeah. It's ultimately both, but it's the balance of that is often different for autistic people, I find, in my larger than average experience of autistic people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To square the circle, I had a choice when you first mentioned Ariana Grande.
Yeah.
To challenge you, well, I wasn't challenging you, but to say something that would potentially have been taken. No, but could have potentially been taken as a personal challenge or criticism about what you were saying. But because of our relationship and because of how we understand our neuro kinship, that didn't feel like a risk to me. And I was right. It wasn't. It's evolved into this incredibly valuable, but also, you know, emotional conversation.
What is going on?
I don't know. I had a scab on my nose. I've no idea what I did to it. Yes, I thought there was some dirt there.
No,
and it wasn't.
Red.
It was a little
There's
scab, and I've got a cut. How the fuck did I cut my nose at the side? How?
With glasses, maybe.
They don't cut. They've got lovely soft nose pieces on them.
I know, but that's where.
But that is where they sit, isn't it? Yeah, it's exactly where. No, it's not actually. No, they sit down here.
But other ones might sit up there.
Yes, the other ones probably it's their fault. I don't know.
Well, maybe there was something rough on them. And you put them on something
yes,
like
and
that,
it must have scraped down. Exactly. Well, it doesn't hurt anyway. But then I know I've got a great variance in pain thresholds depending on the circumstances. Yeah. Aren't we exotic and interesting?
What were you saying before we got taken away by the scratch at the top of your nose?
I think it's okay to frame our core values as altruistic, but we know partly again as therapists that we do these things as humans usually to heal something or to fill a deficit or try to rectify a deficit, which of course you can't ultimately do, but you can have a sense of healing by making something okay for somebody else that wasn't made okay for you. And I think the useful skill set and attributes that we might have to that end are being autistic, being sensitive, empaths, if you want to use those words, having some professional experience over some years of how things impact other people so that we're not so prejudiced by how would that be if it was for me, because that's too subjective. And so we're a very useful species to have, autistic therapists. Humanistic, relational, autistic therapists, that's a valuable species to promote and raise awareness of and be. So there. We've brought up a lot today, a huge amount, but I think this was one of the most... I think for me personally, just as a conversation, it was incredibly useful and emotional and rich. And I think it would be too in the context of the podcast.
Thank you for being with us, lovely listeners. Talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Autistic License podcast. You can connect with us via Instagram, Facebook at autisticlicense.com, or by email at autisticlicense@gmail.com. And we spell license the British way, Licence. We also have a thriving Facebook community. Search for Autistic License Siana and Leo, or click on the link in the show notes.